Good evening, race fans, and welcome to Podium Esports coverage of the opening round for the 2021 eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series, live from the virtual Las Vegas Motor Speedway in Las Vegas, Nevada. James Pike here, the voice of Podium Esports, alongside Evan Pasoko, Jeff McConey of McConey Setup Shop, and our producer Ryan Bauer punching all the buttons in the virtual trailer. And Evan, we know that on the Coke Series broadcast, you're famous for saying that the road to $300,000 starts at Daytona or continues through wherever the Coke Series may be that week. But in reality, the road to $300,000 actually starts here tonight. This is the first step on the ladder to the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, and it's where dreams for sim racing glory begin.
Yeah, there's quite literally hundreds of drivers ready to go racing tonight for the virtual Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And I will give credit to Tim Terry for starting that tradition. Happy to have been able to carry it on. But you are right. The road to $300,000 starts tonight with round one of this qualifier series. And I may be a little bit biased, but no better place, in my opinion, than virtual Las Vegas Motor Speedway. So I think we're going to be in store for a great night of racing.
It's a fun racetrack, but this is a completely revamped series for 2021. First and foremost, there's the name change, Jeff McConey. We go from the eNASCAR iRacing Road to Pro to the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing Series A, but B, more importantly, a format change. Halfway through the season, we're cutting everybody outside of the top 70, and it's two splits that are going to carry us the rest of the way home through the summer and into the fall.
Absolutely, and that adds a whole lot of pressure because beforehand you had a lot longer to work your way up, but now you have 8 races to make your name known, and you have to be top 70 by the end of 8 races. So it takes an already stressful series of races, of official series, and makes it even more stressful, makes it even more difficult, and it rewards consistency, and it rewards being up front from the beginning. You don't want to be behind the 8 ball with a rough night at Las Vegas.
It also places more emphasis on that second split than ever before. And if you're curious, you can pull up Multi-Twitch and go visit our friends at STN Racing. Zach Johnson, Jacob Hitz, and Casey Sawich are bringing coverage of the second split of the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series for the first time ever. You're going to see 2 splits all season long, so definitely have them up in another window while you have our coverage of the top split on the big screen. Time to take a look at where we are in the world and start talking about Las Vegas, Evan, a track that you know very well. This is your backyard. We're about 20 minutes north of the Strip at this complex, which originally started with the short track and some of the smaller pieces of the 1970s and eventually grew through the influence of Speedway Motorsports Incorporated to become the West Coast capital of motorsports in the United States.
Absolutely, and of course the reconfig, right, to get the variable degrees of banking to a 12 degrees on the bottom and 20 up top. That's what I think makes this one of the more fun 1.5 mile intermediate tracks on the sim. Listen, it's still fun to go to the entertainment capital of the world and America's racing showplace at LVMS, go over to the Bullring, go over to the Strip, but the Super Speedway is where it's at. And with these NASCAR trucks tonight, going to be all over the place. Plenty of options for these drivers in tonight's race.
Lots of places that you can go, but momentum is key. The package with these trucks, Jeff McConey, very similar to what you see with the Cup cars.
Absolutely. These trucks are all about momentum. You get the draft. You have to be very, very careful, though, because in these trucks, if you damage them, it can be a long night. You tag the wall, and you can lose half a tenth. You hit it hard enough, you can lose a tenth and a half. And at a track where it's just so important to keep up with the pack and keep that momentum going, it's going to be huge. Expect to see a lot of damage by guys just bumping the wall a little bit. And you'll notice the guy that wins this race at the end is probably going to have a perfectly clean truck.
There are going to be a few people with perfectly clean trucks. There are going to be some folks, I think, though, that end up stuffing it in the fence out of turn 2 and turn 4. There's not quite as much power with these trucks as you have with the Cup cars, but you still have to be mindful of how you run this racetrack, especially with regards to that right rear tire, Evan. It's so easy to burn that particular Goodyear Eagle off of your car and lose any sort of grip that you might have at the beginning of the run. Also, likewise, easy to stuff yourself into the fence and ruin your night in a split second.
Yeah, when you have the momentum-based racing like this, it's so critical to keep these trucks wound up, right? So if you need to get out of the gas in turn 2 or 4, that wall can sneak up on you pretty quickly. It's going to kill you for about a lap and a half. Another thing to keep in mind is, depending on where you are on track, the lower you go, the more bumpy it's going to be, right? Both bumps on the inside of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, they're not as bad in the sim as they've gotten in real life, as that surfaces continue to deteriorate a little bit over the years, but it is definitely still a factor. And when you're tight and on the edge, you catch that bump in the wrong spot, that's you could be in the fence real quick. So it is a very thin margin as these drivers go pack racing tonight to be fast, stay in the throttle, keep that speed up and that momentum without overstepping those bounds. You do not want, as we mentioned with the new format, you cannot, I think, have a bad race to open up this series.
I think it's also worth noting here, for those unfamiliar, this first step does use the trucks of the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series. And in the eNASCAR Road to Pro ladder, you advance from this series, and if you're one of the top 20 in points at the end of the season, you'll move on to the eNASCAR Road to Pro Contender Series, which uses the cars of the NASCAR Xfinity Series. It's a short, usually anywhere between 5 and 7 race season that takes place usually in the fall, October, November, December, and the top 20 in points there will advance to the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series for 2022. Contender Series will feature the top 20 in points from the qualifying series and those who finish 21st or lower in the final points from this season's Coke Series. They'll come together, run a fun little series that you'll see on podium later on in the year, and we'll find out which 20 get to jump in. And part of the intrigue, I think, of the whole setup of the Coke Series is that you can advance and promote yourself or relegate yourself, Jeff Bocconi. That's part of the beauty of it. Last year, we had 13 drivers from last season's Road to Pro campaign eventually advance into the Coke Series, one of the largest classes in some time.
Absolutely. That's part of what makes this a whole lot of fun, is that if you can get through that first round here, well, this year get through the first round, but if you can get into that Pro Series and contend with the bottom 20 from Coke, you can really make a name for yourself. Not only can you go out and race with these guys, but you can beat them and take their spots. And I think that's huge here. Once you reach that Pro Series, that Contender Series, you are there. You have the chance, you have the opportunity. It's all about taking advantage of it, whether that's through some really good luck on your end or some really bad luck on other people's end. Doesn't matter. If you can get there and get up to the top, you've got a chance to run in the Coke Series with the big dogs.
There are some folks who are trying to make that Contender Series for the first time. There are some folks, even within this top split tonight, which has, let's just say, a ridiculous SOF. We are north, I believe, of 7.5K, which I believe is going to break the record set in Daytona a year ago for the all-time highest SOF in the top split in race 1 in this qualifying series. You have to be good in order to make it, and there are lots of drivers who have flirted with the Contender Series that are trying to make their way back. There are drivers who have joined the service as of late that are trying to jump in and make their way into the Contender Series for the first time. But at this time, it's time to bring you the starting grid for this first race of the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series for 2021, which sees Cody Bias, a former Coke Series veteran, start on pole with a qualifying time at 30.261 seconds, and big-time names here across the board. Evan Pasoko, Derek Bordeaux's got experience, Alex McCollum's got experience, Jarrett Liebert's got experience at this level or higher.
Yeah, a lot of familiar faces here, and then you got those drivers on the up and up, right? The likes of Brian Macario and Donovan Strauss trying to challenge Seth the Merchant there as well. Parker Retzlaff, a former Ignite Series winner and champ. Colin Keister, though, back down here trying to get into the show, so is Justin Bolton.
Blake McCandless will be starting 16th tonight. He is always strong wherever he runs. Rusty McCandless, as he likes to go by. Briar LaPrade is bringing a hot rod tonight. Matt Danson, Trayton Lapsevich, known well on the short track, making his debut up here in the trucks with the Road to Pro Series, looking to make something happen. Daniel Roper and Jordy Lopez as well, always very strong.
Jordy Lopez won 2 of the first 3 races in this series a year ago. More names that you've seen if you've watched action in the community over the past year. Anthony Burrows and Walter in the mix. Justin Levine, Devin Curl, Jesse Atchison, Brad Mahar. All drivers that are going to be in the mix tonight in this opening race for the top split of the 2021 eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series. Time to take a closer look at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. This is a 1.5 mile, 2.41 kilometer tri-oval that opened in 1996. We've got 20 degrees of banking in the corners and anywhere from 12 to 20 degrees of banking on the front stretch and the back stretch. This place is a little bit unique in that the progressive banking is not in the corners, but is instead on the straightaways. Not usually the case when you have progressive banking. It's usually in the turns. We go for 134 laps, 201 miles, 323 kilometers this evening on not the default day for iRacing. We changed the weather up a little bit too in this case, so it's not May 15th. It instead is March 6, 2021 in Sim, right around 12:30 p.m. local time. Air temp is 67 degrees Fahrenheit, track temp 87 degrees Fahrenheit, winds headed to the north at 7 miles an hour, and humidity of 21%. Evan Pisoko, so much that we could talk about to start the season off, but this being your home base, anything in particular that you're looking forward to watching these cars tear it up in Sim City?
Well, a couple of things. First off, watch for those drivers that go below the apron in the tri-oval. That's always going to be a part where it gets a little bit loose. You can gain some time if you want to push it. And as well, you talked about the date in the sim. It is this weekend that coincides with the NASCAR trip to Vegas for the triple header. But normally these trucks at LVMS run at night under the lights. Not the case for this race here. So it is going to be warmer, a little bit more slick than what you'll see over the weekend for the actual NASCAR Camp and Road Truck Series.
We are glad that you're with us here on Podium Esports as we get set to begin our second consecutive campaign of qualifying series action. It is Jarrett Liebert going to be trying to chase down Cody Bias, who waits for the green flag to unfurl from the hands of Barney Abner Stunt Grundle, and we are underway. Green flag is out, and the 2021 eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series is underway. They have opened up nicely in the first few laps here at Las Vegas, and Cody Bias taking advantage of that clean air with a off the back deck lid of the number 19 machine that Napa's Auto Care Center Toyota Tundra. But it already, I think, makes very bare and obvious a big point as you see Kevin King working through traffic, Evan, that you are going to have to fight dirty air in these trucks. And if you have the clean air that Bias has, that's a huge advantage because you can take a car that might not necessarily have the best setup, or truck in this case, and make it work for you just because of the aerodynamic advantage.
Yeah, you don't have to go that far back in traffic to feel that dirty air, right? So Bias is going to want to do everything he can tonight through pit cycles, if there's cautions and auto restarts, to maintain that top position. You can see back in traffic here on board with Donovan Strauss, exactly where he started in the number 8 spots. Still a lot of side-by-side, but the bottom appears to be the place you want to be early. We saw Derek Bordeaux drop a spot inside of the top 4 as Tucker Minter got underneath him. More cars down low than up top for the moment, and a couple of drivers are using that apron early on.
Some using the apron, some trying to go to the top side. Parker Retzlaff in the 42 machine, who's done a lot of real-world racing, a lot of short-track racing, both in the real world and the sim. Jeff McConey is the champion of the Grand National Tour that aired on NBC Track Pass back in the spring, right as everything broke out and got crazy. And you look at drivers that have talent throughout this field. Everybody here has incredible amounts of I-rating, but Retzlaff in particular, especially once we get to the shorter tracks, I think has to be considered as a threat to win in the top split.
You are absolutely right. He is a threat to win. He's running with Legacy this year, and they've had a lot of success. Boyd Hogan works behind the scenes there to build those cars and trucks and everything else. He's a fantastic builder, a great person as well, and he puts in the work to make sure that these guys have the equipment underneath them so that they can run up at the top. So maybe you're not seeing too much right now. He's sort of just cruising around there in the top 10, but as the race goes on and these drivers start to adjust as the track changes, that's where you'll see the cars and trucks come to life. The ones that are going to win this might not be the ones towards the front right now.
I think that's also one of the key differences, and I'm glad you pointed it out ever so slightly, Jeff, Evan, that in the Coke Series, it is about the Coke Series teams, but here in the eNASCAR Road to Pro Qualifying Series, it's about the back-end teams that work together, that put together the setups that influence so much of what happens here at the top. You heard Jeff reference Bobby Dale Earnhardt's Legacy Esports. They are starting across all splits 20 trucks this evening, which I believe might be a record for one single back-end team in any year of Road to Pro Qualifying Series competition. But they're not the only name we're going to talk about over the course of this season. You're going to hear from High Performance Motorsports. You're going to hear from North Force Racing. You're going to hear from Nexus Esports and a lot of the other teams that are very well known through the community, which is why I think in part this is maybe the most community-focused major series that you can find in the service, at least on the oval side.
Absolutely, and those olive branches and the roots that these teams, as you mentioned, extend through the Contender Series and through the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. You're on board there with Blake McCandless running in 17th spot. The good news about that is you're not restricted to just 2 official teammates, and of course, you know, there are a lot more teams involved across all the splits in this qualifying series, so that is a very fun dynamic, and I think a lot of the changes that have happened over the sim of the last 3 years, James, have happened at this level, as Alex McCollum's going to look to the outside on Tucker Minter. He wants to go to the race lead. They were both able to get around Cody Byers, so your pole sitters down to 3rd, Minter down on the inside line, and McCollum trying to go to the outside.
So McCollum up there on the top lane where you can roll momentum a little bit easier, Jeff McConey, but you also do burn up the tires a little more there too, and you don't necessarily get the advantage that you would say to Homestead Miami like we were a week ago, where you can pinch somebody down on the inside. It's a little bit more stable racing lanes that you're working with, and a little bit trickier to try and get around people from the high side too.
You hit the nail on the head there. It's all about risk versus reward. The risk is you burn up your tires, you run it too hard early on, but at the same time, it's better to do that now early on, see what the limits are. If I'm going to burn up my right front tire during a race, I'd rather do it at the start. So these guys are working on finding what works, finding what doesn't, and they're going to, once the first pit stop happens, they're going to see, okay, how much am I burning this right front tire? How much am I saving the left sides? What can I do differently? And what did I do last time that worked and what didn't work?
Riding on board with Colin Keisty there just a moment ago, and another case, another team that I think we're going to have to discuss over the course of this season, one of the many tales that we will tell throughout the iRacing membership and community. But how about Space Station Gaming, who entered the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series at the very top for the first time in 2021, courtesy of NASCAR Next member Will Rogers, driver in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He's had a long-standing relationship with the esports organization and convinced them to come over to the iRacing side of things, but I think the biggest thing that separates Space Station from some of the other organizations that have come into the Coke Series the past few years, Evan, is that it is not just about their performance at the very top level. They have a fleet of drivers throughout the community that are competing in the lower levels, including Road to Pro. Rasha Karuth, another one of the members of NASCAR's Drive for Diversity program, is one that sticks out in my mind, no doubt. He's in a few splits below this one, pretty solid shooter himself, but he's in there. Jake Fisher is part of that group as well. Justin Knobloch in the 94 car. So you're going to see Space Station Gaming going to be a factor, I think, at some point. But I just think it's cool that they really are trying to invest throughout the community and not just at the very top.
It's very clear that their objectives are long-term, right? We've seen some teams come and go already at the Coca-Cola Series level, and there are other teams that are involved, like the Clear Urban Sport, Richmond Raceway Esports, and others who from the get-go said, hey, we want to get involved more in a 3-wide at a turn 4. So far, so good. James, couple of cars down on the apron. I think we're going to get away with that one, but it was nearly a mess in 3 and 4.
It was Boyd Hogan who caught the fence way towards the back of the field, got sent over in turn number 4, and plenty of damage to the right side of his Reaper Speed Lab Chevrolet Silverado. We'll take a closer look and see what happened. But tough racing in the middle of the pack through turns 3 and 4. Daniel Roper there down at the bottom, and looks like Roper just got got loose and slid up into Hogan, and just nothing you can do on the outside, which is part of the risk of running up there, especially this early on. If you try and pinch people, you leave the door open to getting slammed into the fence, and it's going to be a tough road back towards the front of the field for Boyd Hogan for the rest of the night, very early on in this race, Chuck.
You're absolutely right, and I mentioned it earlier on that just a little bit of damage can really hurt you, and that's a lot of bit of damage there. He's got right front and right rear damage. You see the right rear is just bent up and bent in. That's going to hurt that truck quite a bit, and he might be able to keep up and stay within about 2 or 3 tenths of the leader if I had to guess, but yeah, I think his chances of a win, unfortunately, are over for him. A little bit further back, though, that's where I think the winner for this race is going to be seen right now. I think it's going to be someone probably 15th to 25th, if I had to guess, that's going to end up winning this race, because these guys that are really smart and really holding on are the ones that built for lap 134, not lap 1.
Looking at Jordi Lopez Jr., the man with plenty of Dominican heritage, very proud of it, very good driver as well, who started off so quickly in this series and won the season opener at Daytona and then went to Homestead and got the victory as well. But also on another one of those teams that we have to talk about, Logitech G Altus Esports, who just signed a huge deal with Horizon Racing to come on board and consolidate their operations for 2021, and there are some big names there, Evan. You've got Lopez there. Seth the Merchant is in this split. He's part of that organization. Michael Cozy Jr., also part of that Window 8820 that you know on Twitch, and there are names that are part of that group that will play a factor in this series at some point this season.
And just signed a deal as well with VRS. You saw on the hood of that truck as well. I mean, they got a lot of drivers in there. Matt Danson, some of the new guys that are going to try to build up the iRacing to make some runs this year and into the future for this Road to Pro qualifying iRacing series. So another one of these grassroots teams, to the point that we were just talking about a little bit earlier, those that are investing at the community level and deeper than just the very top step of the big 3, if you will, of these iRacing National Series. Up front, not a lot of changing. Cody Bias into number 19 of his back to the top of the board for the time being, and finally a bit of space for these guys to breathe just a tad bit through 21 laps early at Vegas, and maybe that little scare mid-pack will mean that we survive this one, and this one will be able to stretch out into a green flag run. The strategy interesting because we are just outside of being able to stretch this to a one-stopper, which means it is a big window for what strategy could be if this race stays green.
It's a tricky one every time you come to Vegas, and it's no different whether or not it's the Cup cars or the trucks. They're so similar when it comes to the way these aero packages perform. No surprise then that fuel mileage tends to play out the same way. So, Jeff McConaughey, if you have a clean race like this, and all variables notwithstanding, if you are designing the ideal pit strategy to complete 144 laps at Las Vegas, what are you going with and why?
Well, I don't want to be the first person to pit. But even more than that, I don't want to be the last person to pit. The tire fall off here is extreme. If you take a look at some of these guys, you'll see that already after only 22 laps, they're a couple seconds off. So last lap for Cody Bias was a 31.898. Towards the beginning of this race, he was running 30.9, 30.85. So he's already lost a full second off of where he started. Now, take another 20 laps or so, 30 laps, where these guys are going to start pitting if it's under green. They're going to be 2, maybe even 3 seconds off the pace. So as soon as someone comes in, you need to pit right after them. So I'm going to tell my driver, stay out as long as you can, take care of your stuff, don't burn through your tires because they fall off bad here. But as soon as I see one of the front runners come in, I'm telling them, get to pit road as soon as you can. We need to get in now.
So just be quick to respond, I think, more than anything else. Don't necessarily be the first one to go, but be ready to change your strategy on the fly depending on what the trucks in front of you decide to do. Valid point, I think, all around as we ride on board with Tucker Minter carrying the Splash and Go graphics colors and Kazmin Nashu, and another one of the Nexus Esports drivers. They always have a strong fleet in Road to Pro competition, and this year's qualifying series campaign no different for one of the mainstays of the back-end organizations of iRacing, you talk about teams that have been there for a while, Evan, them and Dead Zone and Slip Angle and Legacy, and some of these groups that are coming back and have the know-how and a big notebook of years of experience to play off of.
Yeah, those are the teams that built this series, right? Those are the teams that have made the top-level competition in iRacing what it is, and it'll be fun to see, this influx of new teams and investments and, the interest over the last, I'd say, 2-3 years total with all the new teams that we've been talking about. It'll be fun to see how those veteran teams can stack up against those teams in 4 years, right? Who's going to end up on top? Is it going to be those mainstays or some of these new kids on the block going to become the next Slip Angle, if you will? So that's going to be what I'm looking forward to long term. Of course, everybody, this is really your first opportunity to show what you've got and to come out here to make a statement. You guys talked about the iRating. Every single driver in this race over 7,000 iRating. So it just goes to show you how much interest and how committed all these drivers are to get prepped up to be able to compete at this level by the time this week rolled around.
That we have officially a 7.5K strength of field, Jeff McConey, underscores just how competitive this series in particular has become. As the Coke Series has grown in the past few years and that purse has grown bigger, we saw the jump last year to the $300,000 purse from the $100,000 purse we saw before 2020. So has the interest at this level grown in the qualifying series. And it is absurd to think that you could carry a 68, a 6,900 iRating, which would get you top split pretty much everywhere else in the sim. And it's not even good enough to get you into the first split. You're a second split driver with those numbers. That, I think, should make it very clear just how competitive this qualifying series is and is going to be throughout the season.
You are absolutely right. Think about that. So the average driver has about 1,500 to 1,800 iRating, somewhere in that range. Call it 1,600, 1,700 to be generous. You gain maybe, on a really good race, 80 iRating, and on a really bad race, you lose 80 iRating. So these guys are absolutely phenomenal drivers. They've put in the work, they've put in the time, they've put in the effort to make sure that they can run up at the top. And man, they are really doing everything they can up here. But I also want to point out, when you're racing up at this top level, the competition is steep. The biggest mover in the field is Jeremy Allen, and he's gained a total of 8 spots. That's it. Everyone else, maybe 1, 2, 3 spots if they're lucky, of where they started from. 8 spots being the biggest mover in a race after 30 laps, that really goes to show that these guys are not giving up a single inch, and it's really even all around. I think you could see, doesn't matter if you're the 1 or the 35, you still got a chance to win this because you have the talent.
Part of it is, I think, the package. Part of it is the talent. It's a combination of both because just like the Cup cars, you can't really get away from anybody here. It's really hard to create a gap on somebody, and you have to carry momentum. I think even more so in these trucks than you do the Cup cars, because if you get off the gas any way, shape, or form here, immediately you're losing 1, 2, 3, 4, perhaps 5 car lengths, and you get caught up in the dirty marbles in the outside of the racetrack and end up in trouble.
It's just harder to get that speed back, right? So, once upon a time, this truck series was the anomaly amongst the A, B, and C cars, right? But now with the way that the NASCAR Cup Series car works with the new era package, that it's kind of the Xfinity car, the B car, that's the outlier, right? So this may be a better translation. You take setups into account and all that, but this may be a better translation to what somebody can do with a Cup car than when you get to that B series and, you move up to the Contender series. So that's kind of the interesting dynamic amongst these top 3 series, is that you're challenging now for the same style of racing that you want to go to by the end of the day. But of course, this is only step 1 of 3 on the road to fight for $300,000. And if you can get to the Contender Series this offseason, it is a completely different challenge to keep these drivers on their toes. But back to the point I just wanted to make, talking about the iRating, and there's almost iRating inflation, right? As we see the battle for second off of the back of Bias, Liebert and Bordeaux going to go at it for second and third. James, you can't just be a good driver, maybe be a once upon a time a Coke Series driver and just kind of lull around on the sim and get back into it, right? Because these drivers are keeping at it, their iRatings are only getting higher, you have to stay active, you have to race top split, you have to race NIS if you want to stay at an iRating level to compete. So these young guys are forcing it for these veterans to stay more active on the sim than they've ever been.
I think the level of competition makes it very clear, at least to me, that there are people who are very successful at just earning I rating with one particular car or type of car and don't necessarily venture out into different classes of cars, especially on the oval side. You could be a good Legends car driver, but you might not necessarily see those skills translate over to the trucks or the Xfinity cars or the Cup cars, for example. And while that may boost your I rating up, more often than not, those sorts of drivers get found out in series like these where, you may be able to dominate in truck racing or Xfinity Series racing and rack up a 7.2, 7.3K I rating, but when it comes to this series, you need to have skill in the trucks. But I think more importantly, more often than not, the people that tend to succeed in this qualifying series, Jeff McConey, are ones who manage to compete across all the different oval cars on the surface. That it's not just the trucks you have to run in. It's the Legend cars you got to get used to. It's the ARCA cars, which provide their own challenge with the extra horsepower. Same to some degree with the Xfinity cars. And then working the draft and the momentum with the Cup cars, too. You really do have to round out your I rating profile on the oval side to gain the skills you need to be able to run up front consistently in this series, in this split, week after week.
Oh, well, that is a low blow to the guy that was most well known in the tour mods, but okay, I understand where you're coming from. No, you are absolutely right. It takes a whole lot of skill all around in order to make it up to the Coke Series. You practice in the trucks and you work your way up here, and then all of a sudden you've got to race your way through Road to Pro, and you did it. You make it to the Contender Series. Now you have to go and continue competing. Congratulations, you've made it to the Coke Series. Now you're up in the Cup cars. You're racing with the best of the best on the service. You can't just be good at one thing. If I were thrown out here being a tour modified driver, I would be struggling. And I'm more than happy to admit that, because it takes a very skilled driver to be good at everything. That's why you see a 7,000 I rating field out here, where for the most part, they're all within 10 seconds of each other. First to 33rd is within 10 seconds. And that's because these drivers that are out here are good at everything they run in, and they're proving it tonight.
Working our way through the first 40 laps of tonight's season opener for the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series, where Cody Bias has stretched it out to a 0.7 of a second lead over Jarrett Liebert, racing for total advantage. The association with Dead Zone Racing also there too. That, of course, Landon Huffman's operation, the son of Robert Huffman, who made his name in the NASCAR Goodies Dash Series, racing a White House Apple Juice Toyota Celica back right around the turn of the millennium for those of us who I guess might not have been so blessed by Father Time, but we remember how good his father was in that. And Landon's carried on the tradition, not only short track racing, but extending his reach to the esports realm and to iRacing too. He's got his own team, and you want to talk about teams that I think also go in that bucket of names we're going to talk about throughout the season. Total Advantage absolutely is right there, and the home of the I guess would have been defending champion of this series. Alan Bowes was the one who won the qualifying series in 2020. He, of course, advanced to the Coke Series, so no need to defend his title this year, but they made a very big point on Twitter this afternoon, Evan, about how they wanted to go back-to-back, and Liebert doing a nice job carrying the banner for them so far.
You can't argue with any better of a start, right? And he's also been able to pull a little bit of distance. So Bias is 7/8 tenths ahead of Liebert, and then Liebert's got his own, about a 7/10 of a second advantage back over to the cars. So you're looking off of the back of Bias. Second car back there, Jarrett Liebert. And then third on back is where everybody's still in connection with each other, right? We saw Minter, Bordeaux, you got Keister and King all in that mix. Alex McCollum trying to get back up to the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, but at the point in the run now, 42 laps in, starting to spread things out, caution-free thus far. Starting to guess the crew chief, strategy-wise, that conversations are going to start to heat up.
You start thinking about it at this time for sure, Jeff McConey, because you know how wild it gets. Now, you look on your screen, and this must be one of, if not the most unique schemes in all of the top split of the qualifying series. Our good friend Blake McCandless out of Norse Force Racing. For those of you who don't know the story, Blake's grandfather, Herb McCandless, was a famous drag racer back in the 1960s and a champion of the U.S. Nationals, the biggest drag racing event for the NHRA in the United States. This car that he is running is based off of his grandfather's 67 Dodge Dart, which is why you don't see any numbers on the top or the bottom, because dragsters don't need numbers. They had fun paintings and drawings and stylings on the side. So what you see here is actually a recreation of the scheme that Herb ran back in the 60s. Gorgeous work by Cosmino Shoot's Blast and Go Graphics to get that paint scheme right, but a little bit of history and also a nice play on names in that bucket to Blake, of course, Mr. F4 Speed here on Twitch, a play on his grandfather's nickname, Mr. 4-Speed, because he used a 4-speed shifter in the drag race, and not too many people can make a 4-speed shifter go quick in a quarter mile, but Herb McCandless is certainly one of them. So one of my, I think, favorite stories just off of skiing so far. I'm sure we'll see plenty of fantastic paint jobs over the course of this Road Pro campaign, but for now, we'll keep our eyes a little bit further back. This is Seth the Merchant for Logitech G Altus Esports, working his way around the top line and the high line, working his way around Alex McCollum, where he's racing for Amuka and High Performance Motorsports there, Nick Morris's team, which another one. We keep on sort of naming teams, but this is a night where we're going to try and introduce you to the big folks that are going to be players all season long in this series, as we've got a few trucks that have decided to come down pit road, Jeff.
Yep. What happened there was one driver called out over the radio, "I'm coming in," and all of a sudden the radios, which had been dead silent all night, everyone lit up with, "I'm pitting, I'm coming in this time, heads up, I'm hitting pit road." Like I called earlier, once one person comes in, you're going to see a lot of people come in. Here comes our leader. Cody Bias now hits pit road. He knows the longer you stay out there, the longer you're out there on old tires, a couple seconds off the pace. So he made a really good call there to come down pit road. 50 miles an hour is a whole lot slower than it looks on here. When you're inside the car, it is just dragging by, and you are hoping you get a quick pit stop.
It goes back to exactly what Jeff said, Evan, about how these leaders needed to respond quickly. Don't necessarily be the first one down, but when you start seeing people come, make the move quick to make sure you don't give up time, because if you stay out there and don't get the yellow, that's an easy 2, 3, 4 tenths a second per lap that you are giving up to the people who come down pit road for 4 tires and fuel.
Yeah, Lee would assume the race lead. He comes right down pit road, right? And that goes back to the conversation about how these trucks drive, right? If you're in the B car, the Xfinity car, where you don't really have to rely that much on the momentum, that much on the track position, you can get away with a 5 or 10 lap difference on a pit cycle. And these things, if you get stuck behind somebody, your laps are, tires are only 2 laps older, you're going to be in a bad spot and you may get stuck there. So that's why you're going to see these drivers respond. And even though they could stretch it maybe another 12 laps, as we see Kevin King, Seth the Merchant, and everybody else, Strauss, Bolts, and McCandless, Lapsovich, Tucker, all pile in from the top 10 and down pit road. They're all going to get this done basically right on the money at 1/3 distance.
So nobody wanted to try and stretch it and make use of the track position and wait potentially for a yellow flag. To me, that's interesting, and I think also another indicator of how tight this field is, Jeff McConey, that even the pit strategies are dead on. We only have maybe about a 5 or 6 lap difference between the first truck that came down pit road into that cycle and this group of trucks that's coming down to complete the pit cycle now.
Absolutely, and we'll see how well it cycles out for a lot of these drivers. A name that immediately caught my eye, running right behind Cody Bias, is Briar LaPrat. He'd been cruising around in 18th or so, but now looks like he made a good call on pit stops. He's got, let's see, who is that? That's Derek Bordeaux down on his inside, another guy that was running up front. So these guys now are running back with Briar LaPrat, or I should say Briar LaPrat is running up with these guys. I think that was a really good pit call by him that got him up there. We'll see how it all cycles out, though.
It's a question of whether or not the 2 laps actually matter, but conversely, just as you can lose time and you stay out, you can gain time by coming in a little bit earlier than everybody else. And so long as that gap isn't significant, and I'd say about 1 to 2 laps usually is right in the ballpark of where you want to be, you can leapfrog somebody on the racetrack by short pitting them. And that's exactly what Briar LaPrat has tried to do as we ride on board with Tucker Minter in the 17 machine. Everybody getting around, and Briar, who's just sort of trapped on the outside. But another team that we haven't had the chance to talk about yet, but we will absolutely be talking about over the course of the year. Lockdown Racing with Briar LaPrat, and Ledford Billiard Supply back with Briar for another season. Cameron Ledford, a longtime supporter of Briar, but the man from Manchester, Tennessee, carrying a new number for 2021. Gone is the 19 and the Toyota that he traditionally runs in the Ford F-150, and the stylized 35 in line with Front Row Motorsports. And that, of course, is because Anthony Alfredo entered a partnership with Lockdown Racing a few weeks ago, and now he has completely given a makeover to the folks at Lockdown. So everybody running in this qualifying series campaign. There are a few trucks that they've got spread out across the splits, but they're all going to bear resemblance to the same kind of front row motorsports machines that Anthony is going to be driving all year long with the number 38 in the NASCAR Cup Series in real life. But again, Evan, just sort of underscoring the relationship between iRacing and real life NASCAR. It is tighter now than it has ever been in iRacing's 10 plus years of existence.
And that's only going to continue as the years go on, right? We saw Breyer get a couple of spots there off of the restart. Derek Bordeaux in third, but how long is that going to last there? The likes of Keister and Minter are able to get on by him. So the short pit did work, right? LaPrade, you talk about that maybe 2-second difference in your freshest tire laps versus what you were putting down before you came down pit road. No shock that therefore if you come down to pit 2 laps earlier, you're going to instantly gain anywhere from 4 to 5 seconds. Right now the concern is if on the back end of a short pit, you're going to have older tires sooner. Drivers can get back on you. We saw LaPrade pick up some spots, but he lost them. Fell right back down a couple of positions. Jordi Lopez, somebody else who picked up a handful of spots right after the pit cycle. He has cycled back down to 4th, but is overall up after starting 21st, guys. No pit stops, green flag racing, and Lopez is on the move. He's under fire by a couple of heavy hitters here, and again, is on the back foot now, so he gains spots immediately. He'll drop a couple now on the backside of the pit strategy, but he's been making moves.
Jordi Lopez, I think, Jeff McConaughey, is somebody that we're going to watch as an outright threat to maybe win this championship in the Road to Pro qualifying series outright. He had so much speed out of the gate a year ago, and then it just sort of fizzled when we got to April and May, and it never seemed like he could get back. I know there were a few races that he missed in that stretch where I just couldn't quite get the opportunity to run, got tied up with other things and events going on in his life. But if Jordi can come through these first few races and carry the same kind of speed that he had last year and bring that to May, to June, and get into the top 70, watch out. Jordi Lopez Jr. will absolutely be a threat to win this series title outright, which is no small feat given the amount of drivers that compete in this.
Absolutely. I mean, if you manage, whoever manages to win this is going to be proven as one of the most skilled drivers in the history of iRacing. This is probably the most competitive field in terms of strength of field and just pure raw talent out here. Now, because we've been really in a pandemic the past year, a lot of people have had a lot of time to be at home and practicing. And while they've been working on side projects, they've been attending school online, they've been doing this and doing that, they have a lot of time to practice and turn laps and find what they're good at and find what works and find what doesn't. That's why I think we're seeing such a high strength of field, because now these guys have an opportunity to showcase their talents. They have the time to do it. And I think really we're going to see probably the best field ever getting through to the Pro Series. And if they get up into the Coke Series, next year, 2022, is going to be a very interesting year. And I think a lot of the veterans that will stay up there are going to be given a run for their money.
One of the best parts, I think, of the promotion system, and Jeff touched on it a little bit, I'll expand on it further, of it, is that you get up there and you make your way through the qualifying series and through the contender series, and there's no question. If you make it to the Coke Series, you have earned your spot there because you have outraced a host of other drivers to get to the top 40. With the way this system is set up, there's not really any way to sort of bypass or, fast track your way to the Coke Series. At minimum, you have to put in a season in the qualifying series just to have a shot at pro. And for a lot of the drivers in this field, there are multiple seasons that they've spent in this qualifying series trying to race their way up into Coke Series. So you can't just magically jump in unless you have otherworldly talent. You get that far, you've earned it, no question, more often than not.
Well, the fun thing is we talk about how this series gets more competitive every year, right? If you advance through this 2021 iteration of this eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing series, you will have gone through a harder qualifying series than those 20 drivers who are going to be sitting waiting for you in the Coke Series when it's your turn in the Contender Series, right? You have to continuously step up your game. Does that mean you're going to go in there and walk all over them? Absolutely not, right? Those drivers are at the very top level for a reason. However, some of those guys that have been in the Coca-Cola Series for 2-3 seasons, some of the vets even longer, it's been very tough to maintain status, so that's a very small few. But once upon a time when they got through, It was the hardest, but you compare this 2021 iteration to 20, to 19, to 18, to 17, it is that much more difficult that you are battle tested by the time you get to that point.
And I think also to touch on another point that Jeff made that I think definitely applies here, this is the first proper full go at this qualifying series since everything in the world changed last year. It all sort of started right around the time that this qualifying series started in 2020. So now that new crop of drivers that came in back in the spring, they've had 7-8 months to get their feet wet with the sim and practice. And I think that too, Jeff, has only raised the level of competition further.
Absolutely, and a lot of people have actually upgraded their equipment. They've gotten new stuff. They're trying out different things. So in that respect too, a lot of people are on much better stuff, and we're seeing some contact there look like between Donovan Strauss. Oh boy, they are really fighting hard back here near Briar-LaPrade. You see that? They're 3 wide, Briar in the middle. That is the 10 car down on the bottom. Jordy Lopez up on the outside. Donovan Strauss squeaks his way through with Justin Bolton trying to get through as well. A little bit of craziness there, but everyone manages to come through. No worse for wear.
Donovan Strauss in the 51 machine in the mix there. And Donovan, another driver who announced a big move just a few days ago. I believe actually might have been yesterday or today that he is racing with Elliott Sadler Esports in this qualifying series campaign for 2021. Of course, they've got drivers at the top with Ashton Crowder and Garrett Maines competing in the Coach Series, but everything changes because Jeremy Allen has gone around in turn 2, and just like that, we have our first yellow flag of the evening in our 2021 eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series opener. We'll take a look at the replay in just a moment and see what happened to Jeremy, who competed in the Coach Series last season, but looks like there may have been a little bit of help in turns 1 and 2 for the 42 machine, and I believe that's what sent Jeremy Allen around.
Well, watch as they go off into turn number 1 here. Closes in on the back bumper to number 2 Ford in front of him. And right there's the touch. And it is one-way trip into the outside wall. Just a little bit of contact, driving it in hard again. I don't think the intention there was to spin him, but as you look off at the back of Allen, you'll see the touch right here.
Ever so slight contact, and it wasn't a lot. Just tried to drive it in a little bit deeper underneath Allen's machine, but the margins are tight on these 1.5 miles. You're traveling at 165 plus miles an hour, and even the slightest bump, Jeff McConaughey, can send you sideways and up into the fence.
It absolutely can. It doesn't take much, especially with how loose you have to run these cars. If you take a look inside of these cars while these guys are driving, some of them are very, very loose, and that's by design. The looser you are, the quicker you can be. Now you see everyone come down pit road. Now, I'm an engineer. I love my numbers, and when I'm sitting there and I'm up on the box as a crew chief looking at the numbers, the one thing that I'm looking at is lap times. So after those pit stops, it was the 3rd lap out for Cody Bias. That was the quickest, a 30.918. By the time he was getting towards the end there, lap 63 was a 31.674. Now, you're 7/10 off the pace. That's way too far off in order to stay out there. You're on about 20-lap-old tires, 15-lap-old tires, and Cody Bias loses the lead. He's going to cycle out in 4th, it looks like, off of pit road, but 4 tires and fuel for everybody here. I think that's the only logical call to make. Around halfway through the race, this is actually pretty perfectly halfway through the race. So you've still got a couple sets of tires left. You're not in any danger. Come down, take 4, and get some fresh rubber on that thing to go for another half of the race here.
And since it is halfway through the race, gives us the perfect opportunity to bring you our first iRacing Midway race break of the season, which is brought to you by iRacing, the world's premier online racing game. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat to experience today's newest form of competitive motorsport. Virtual racing, all from your home PC. Race virtually in Australian supercars, IndyCar, IMSA, NASCAR, the World of Outlaws, and more. And it will be Derek Bordeaux who will lead this field back to green ahead of Parker Retzlaff. Tucker Minter, Cody Bias, and Colin Keister complete the top 5. It's Alex McCollum, Justin Lisenby, Kevin King, Donovan Strauss, and Blake Meir that make up 6th through 10th as they run. Evan Pizzoco.
And Justin Bolton just outside of the top 10, along with Dan Roper and Briar-LaPrade. Blake McCandless and Jordy Lopez Jr. dropping it back from being a top 5 car just a little bit ago is in 15th. Seth DeBurgett rides 16th at the moment, along with Brian Mercurio in 17th spot. Trayton Lapsovich at 18th. Dylan Alt scored 19th, and Larry Pace, your top 20.
Logan Kress is riding around in 21st. Michael Fenlington from Lockdown is in 22nd. Matt Danson 23rd. Jesse Atchison 24th. He started 35th in this field, started absolute rear end, actually started a lap down. Now he's fought his way up to 24th. Brandon Below in 25th. Drew Farniers in 26th. Tyler Severa, Devin Curl are 27th and 28th respectively. Brad Mayhart 29th and Justin Levine in 30th.
It's Casey Tucker, Jeremy Allen, Jarrett Liebert, Anthony Burrows, and Boyd Hogan completing your field at the halfway point of tonight's season opener for the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series. And that concludes tonight's iRacing midway race break. With over 170,000 drivers on the service and over 90 laser scan tracks and cars to choose from, iRacing is your portal to the racing world. Get on track today at iRacing.com. We'll take a quick commercial break, but we'll be back with more action from Las Vegas Motor Speedway. You're watching coverage of the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series on Podium Esports. Welcome back to Podium Esports coverage of the first round of the 2021 season of the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series. James Plank, Evan Pisoko, and Jeff McConey bringing you all the action from Las Vegas Motor Speedway in Nevada, and Ryan Bauer producing all of the wonderful shots that you see on your screens with cameras courtesy of Dougie Beard. Getting set for a restart after our first yellow flag of the evening. We'll go green flag racing on lap 69 of 134, and we have just about split this race perfectly in half to where these drivers should be able to make it on one run. You think it should be all right for them, but you never quite know. I feel like if there's one more yellow, you feel a little bit more comfortable with it, but we'll keep our eyes peeled and see who manages to get to the end, or if it doesn't matter if we get a yellow in between now and the end of the race. It's Derek Bordeaux. We'll get the chance to lead us to green flag racing with Parker Retzlaff there as well. And we go green flag racing once again from Las Vegas, and the 16 machine takes off and jumps out ahead, or rather the 04 machine of Bordeaux. But another man with former Coke Series experience getting to the front and getting there quickly. Trouble in the back straightaway before we even get 2 or 3 laps under green flag racing, and cautions breeding cautions very quickly in this one. Looks like there was contact. I believe it was Justin Bolton and Brian LaPrade that ended up getting together to bring out the second yellow flag. Maybe a little bit of help from Daniel Roper in the 15 as well, but we'll take a look at the replay, see what happened towards the back of the field and whether or not we had a few more trucks get caught up in this.
Just trying to get underneath them, right? We saw the first incident with Jeremy Allen into 1 and 2 that kind of slowed this race up to begin with. It was a dive down to the bottom in 1. This time it's in 2, and it was a bit of touch on the outside. I don't know if Retzlaff slowed down the 10 or what, but it certainly looked like that, Bolton trying to make a move there and try to make a dive to the inside maybe with a bit of 3 wide. And it's just interesting it happens in 2 instead of 1. Let's watch the onboard.
Really tight stuff here if you're Jordy Lopez in a heart in throat moment, I think, given that we've seen incidents maybe a little bit more so back in the olden days when Las Vegas had 13 degrees of banking and there was a little bit more grass in the back straightaway, where you wreck at that particular point of the racetrack and it's immediately 5, 10, 15 cars that get caught up in a wreck like that off the restart. But here in this case, with the repave that came in 2007 and the increase in banking and speeds and widening of the racing surface, ultimately Jeff McConaughey relatively easy for these drivers to escape. Now, the question is whether or not it's going to be that way as we get closer to the end of tonight's event.
The bigger they are, the harder they fall. And once this race gets back going and once they get closer to the end here, that's where I think we're going to see some craziness. Usually the big one is reserved for super speedways, but at a 1.5 mile track like this where you're carrying so much momentum, it's going to be crazy. Now, if you're someone like Briar LaPrade in that last wreck where it happened right in front of him and it was very close and he had to all but stand on the brakes to work his way around, now you're thinking in the back of your head, okay, I need to take it easy. I just saw what could have happened there. I got my lucky break. I used my one get out of jail free card. Now it's time to be careful. So anyone that was around that wreck, I think they're going to be taking it easy. But if they were up ahead of it or so far behind it, it didn't impact them, that's going to be a signal to them of, shoot, it's time to go. Caution could come out at any time. Cautions breed cautions. I need all the spots I can get, and I need them now, which could lead to more caution. So it snowballs very easily here. You have to be careful.
Maybe time to potentially release the hounds. And speaking of hounds, we did mention a few paint schemes earlier that we'd touch on throughout the broadcast. Even though he's way towards the back of the field, we'd be remiss not to touch on Anthony Burrows. For those of you who are Walter fans, we'll see if we can get a good shot at this thing as it comes down pit road. But that is, in fact, Anthony's dog, Walter, whose name you see plastered all over that Ford F-150 and whose face you see on the deck lid for Nexus C Sports, one of the big tropes. And Anthony was very competitive in the Contender Series a year ago, was right on the cusp of making it into the Coke Series last year. And I think that experience, Jeff, definitely not only solidified everybody's know-how of Anthony Burrows' talent. It was very obvious over the course of last year, but I think also makes him hungrier, makes him smarter as he begins this next campaign, trying to go through the rungs and get back towards another potential shot at the Coke Series at the end of the year.
I don't want to dodge your question, but are you sure that Walter is his dog? Are you sure about that, James?
All right, tell me something I don't know that if you want to.
No, I'm just saying that's a well-known like meme on the internet. I've seen that all over the internet. So if that's his dog, then his dog has been fully memed through and through. But I'm fairly certain Walter is just a meme and not his personal dog. I could be mistaken, though.
I mean, at this point,
if it is, he's got good royalties, would be my
yeah. I mean, honestly,
at this point, it's all one and the same because so I think those of us in the community know it's just so synonymous. You think of Anthony, you think of Walter. Like it's all like. There are people who would not know any better, and I think the only thing that matters is that Anthony's got some work to do to get back up to the front. That's the big thing here.
It's his dog now. We don't care how it started. It's his now.
Right. It's very much his dog now, and it's his fights that he's going to have to go through here. He's going to restart in 31st, but on fresh tires. So certainly room to roam for the number 62 machine as we maybe lay off all the dog puns here and get back towards the front of this field where Derek Bordeaux again is going to lead us to green flag racing. But you look at some of the names up here and some of the drivers who have had good runs. How about Parker Retzlaff, who's come up from 11th to 2nd in this field, Colin Keister 12th to 5th, and Daniel Roper 20th to 10th. There's not too much movement amongst the top 10, Jeff McConey, but some of these drivers, whether or not it's through taking advantage of these restarts and finding the right gaps, or whether or not they just got the pace, done a nice job working their way through this field so far.
They absolutely have, and we've received confirmation from chat, James, that is not his dog. He wishes it was his, but Walter is not Anthony Burrows' dog. He's just a big fan. But speaking of drivers that are up in the top 10, Parker Retzlaff started in 11th. Now he's sitting in 2nd. Going to restart on the outside here, but restarting on the outside at Las Vegas, not always where you want to be, but green flag is out, and they are going.
Off and away they go at Las Vegas once again, and it was a fantastic restart for Derek Bordeaux, who immediately jumps out to about a 3-truck length lead on Parker Retzlaff, and then the side-by-side battles start for P3 and 4. That's where Tucker Minter and Cody Bias are door-to-door, as Bias slides a little bit further back, and now Colin Keister is going to try and make a move down to the inside for Space Station Gaming.
Finds himself about 5th in line, and now a challenge for the race lead is Parker Retzlaff going to squeeze to the outside of Derek Bordeaux, and they'll drag race down the Dallas straightaway.
How about that number 1 truck? Parker Retzlaff's got the highest I rating in the field, an astronomical 9,104. And that's a big target on your back when you are carrying the number 1 I rating in top split, but it also underscores just how good of a driver in iRacing Parker Retzlaff is, Jeff.
Absolutely. He's certainly cut his teeth down at the lower levels, running in the Legends and SK mods, Tour mods, late models, super late models. I've had the privilege of running with him, and in all the times that I've raced him, I can think of maybe 2 or 3 where I've ever gotten out ahead of him and beaten him. Maybe 2 or 3 in the dozens and dozens of times we've raced. Parker is one heck of a wheel man. He won the Tour Modifieds, the Ignite Series I think that was about 2 years ago now, where he went out and it was a fantastic series, very, very talented drivers. He went out and won it with ease almost. So now he's racing up here in the Road to Pro Series, but he's got some steep competition. He's got that number 1 on his car, but man, oh man, Tucker Minter is giving him a run for his money, and he's got Derek Bordeaux, Cody Bias, who's been so strong in this race, Colin Keister right behind him.
Almost looked like in the last lap or 2 that Retzlaff's truck just got a little bit tight, and it opened up the door for Minter to go underneath him. However, Retzlaff's also been able to carry the momentum off the high lane on corner exit, so it's kept Minter from being able to complete the pass, and you end up with the classic 2x2 racing that you expect to see in the trucks at Las Vegas, especially right off of restarts as we are.
You can see Retzlaff pushed a little bit that time at a 4, but then didn't have to back out of it, and really good helping hand there coming for the back end as you got Minter and you got Bordeaux on that second row, basically pushing those leaders through. And Retzlaff going to go all the way back to the front of the field now, this time off of 2, and the inside going to drop back a little bit, so maybe this will pay due dividends as this cycles through. Now a look to the inside, and here's the crossover. Colin Keister wants a bit of his own, almost like a plate race. He pushed Retzlaff to the lead, crossed him over to the inside, and Hill might just lead it at the stripe as they'll drag race.
They will drag race, and it will be Keister at the stripe. The question is whether or not he can clear Parker Retzlaff in the middle of 1 and 2. Answer to that question is they exit back onto the Dallas straightaway. No. Parker Retzlaff able to maintain the momentum on the top side, and now this does become an exercise, Jeff McConey, in pinching from the top if you are that 42 truck, which we've not seen for the race lead yet tonight, but certainly I think is something we're going to need to watch as this race winds down.
That's also something that's well known about Parker Retzlaff, is he is very aggressive and he does not like to give up position. So I think he will definitely be pinching Colin Keister here. He's given him about a car length right now, car width I should say, of distance, but these guys are running very hard. But keep this in mind, there's still about 40 laps to go, about 50 laps to go, excuse me. So you have to take care of your stuff. There's one more pit stop left if we go green to the end here. That's it. So I expect to see these guys come in right around lap 100, cut it in half, save a couple sets of tires for some green-white checkers should we have them. But you have to be careful with your stuff. You don't want to be fighting too hard and burn off your right front tire, because then you're going to have a long, long last 52 laps.
Almost wonder if we might be seeing that a little bit with Retzlaff, who did not get out of turn 2 all that well. That allowed Alex McCollum to go to his outside and take over the second spot. But as I look at this top 5, Evan, you look at some of the names in here.
They're wrecking in 4.
A little bit further back, Cody Bias got Dimmons, and they will spread out all the way across the grass in one truck all the way down towards pit road. But a big moment there for Bias, who now has significant front-end damage to his Toyota Tundra.
Did their best to wreck them all, but that was a great piece of driving by everybody in the top 20 to avoid that incident. Let's watch what happened. Retzlaff tucked in line 3rd. It's going to be the battle side by side behind. Off it into the center, 3 and 4, and right there, just a little bit of a touch, a big slide to the outside, and I don't know how it didn't wad up about a dozen trucks in that one. Very fortunate to get away, but those damaged trucks are going to hurt now for the rest of this run.
And it's a big, big blow to Cody Bias's hopes, who started on pole and is now currently scored in the 16th position, just behind the nose of Blake McCandless in his Chevy Silverado, and dropping like a stone through this field very quickly. That nose damage is going to cost you anywhere from 5 to 10 miles an hour on every straightaway that you run, and Bias is going to very quickly drop towards the back of this field, Jeff McConaughey.
You're absolutely right. Cody is definitely in a bit of trouble, as is Daniel Roper. He's got some left rear damage, and that is just very unfortunate incident there. Cody Bias now way, way off the pace. 31.875 that last lap. Before he got involved, he was running 31.0s. And now up at the front, last lap, 31.875 for Cody Bias. Alex McCollum at 31.392. Half a second off the pace per lap.
Not going to bode all that well for the rest of this race. We'll keep track of where Cody eventually lands. He can use a quick yellow flag. The problem, though, for Cody is that, at least down that front, that almost wreck spread this field out significantly, especially in the middle of the pack. And I think that's going to make it much trickier for these drivers to get into one another, because it's usually off the restarts that you see big-time wrecks like the one that we arguably should have had there happen. You give it about 5 to 10 laps and they spread out, Evan, and the likelihood of any sort of big incident happening and cautions going sort of back-to-back in a 5 to 10 lap stretch really, really drops off. It's more likely at this stage that we're going to see a 20, a 30, maybe a 40 lap green flag run to take us, if not to the end outright, very close to.
Yeah, and that probably should have been the yellow right there, right? I was almost thinking that this race was going to turn out like an inverse of what we saw on Tuesday night with the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series race here at Vegas, where it was the start of the race with yellows at restarts, and it was the second half that was green with the strategy in the mix, right? In this one, the first half, green pit stops, and then that yellow came at an interesting time because it didn't mess up the pit strategy all that much, right? Everybody came down, but the plan all along was they were still going to need to pit one more time under green anyways, and they still had to offer the restart. So we are not home free yet, but what it did do is tighten everybody up. And when we had that second one, I started to think, well, this could get messy. That probably deserved to be a wreck there, but you're right. The front of the field is way spread out now. Mid-pack still fighting strong. This is where some issues could come from, but your leaders have pretty much stretched things out.
Yeah, you look at this gaggle here. It starts with Larry Pace, Blake McCandless just to the outside of your shot, sort of hiding here, but Seth Merchant is in the mix. Logan Kress is here. Dylan Alt is in this battle. Anthony Burrows trying to make his way back through the field, has done a nice job working the outside to gain some track position, but they are all over each other in this group of about 10 trucks or so, Jeff McConaughey.
You are absolutely right. They are really battling hard, and like I said, you have to be careful when you're battling that hard. You don't want to mess anything up. You don't want to get hit in the back. You don't want to damage your truck at all. Anthony Burrows having a good run there. Walter is flying high. He's got that truck all the way up to 17th. He restarted. He was a lap down at one point. He took the wave around here. Now he's on the freshest tires in the field because he got that wave around. He's cruising good. I think he's got a chance to get his way up towards the front here. Bear in mind, one more green flag pit stop is coming, barring any caution. So these guys still have a chance to come in, make those final adjustments, slap some tape on the front, and get that thing ready for the end of the race. The most important thing isn't keeping up with the track, it's staying ahead of it. Because if you're keeping up, by the time you put those 4 tires on, man, you are already outdated. You have to adjust and be ready for the next step coming up. So I think these guys here, they're going to slap some tape on it, make their final adjustments, and ride it out to the end and make something happen. Time is ticking here, 40 to go.
How about Blake McCandless taking it 3 wide? I think that was the damage truck of Boyd Hogan, and indeed it was, that he put 3 on the exit of turn 4, but he jumped right around a Michael Finlayson and sent the 36 back a spot into 12th as McCandless now climbs up to 11th, and he's going to try and follow Jordy Lopez to get around Kevin King and get a spot in the top 10. As you look off the rear deck lid a little bit further up the field, this is off of your leader, Alex McCollum, looking back at Colin Keister in that Space Station Gaming Ford F-150.
Yeah, Lopez is somebody who really benefited from the timing of that yellow because, of course, we talked about how he had come down to the pit lane about 2 laps earlier than the majority of your top 5, top 10. That gave him a bunch of track position off for the restart, but he was starting to burn it, right? Dropping it back through the field on the older tires, but that opportunity to kind of stop that bleeding, get the yellow, get it back even, and also kind of end up as a net positive has worked out well for him because he sits at 9th at the moment. Michaela is going to follow him through to take over the number 10 spot, and the side-by-side behind will be between Kevin King and Michael Finlayson.
Really good stuff right around Lopez and McCandless. This is some of the best action on track that you're going to see. Also of note, the truck right ahead of him, that black truck you see on the left side of your screen, Blake Neer, has got some front end damage, and that's going to slow him up on the straightaways, especially given that he's the lead car on this pack. Air's going to come off that nose and drag him down just a little bit. So stands to reason that if Jordy Lopez can get a good run or Blake McCandless can get a good run, that you might see a change for position as we look on board with Derek Bordeaux trying to work his way to the outside of Colin Keister to maybe get second, as Blake McCandless has gotten to the inside of Lopez a little bit further back trying to get into ninth.
Michael Finlayson now looking to take advantage with Jordy Lopez up on the outside. He can try and get a run in there, but you also have to remember, these guys are being patient. They know that it's got just a couple more laps before they come down, get the last of their rubber. Alex McCollum, though, he is someone that is not being patient. He needs to get up front and he needs to go. Derek Bordeaux as well just made the pass for second place. He's up there right on that back bumper, about a truck length off. He's got a good chance of taking the lead here, and if I'm gonna pit from anywhere, I'd rather pit from the lead.
Bordeaux, I think, is an interesting case, and Evan, you'll know plenty about the man in the number 16, or rather the 04 machine. It's the timing and scoring. That's to play tricks in my mind. But in either case, we talked earlier about all the new blood and the new talent and the increase in competition that we've seen in this qualifying series throughout the past few seasons. But Derek Bordeaux, we're going to talk about names that have been around iRacing pretty much since the beginning. Bordeaux has seen it all, has done it all, and even now, almost 10 years after he first entered the sim, still one of the most competitive drivers in this field tonight.
And I know that the plan is never to drop down to the contender series, right? Then to drop down to this qualifying series. But to the point that I made a little bit earlier, as he'll slide by on the outside and take the race lead at lap number 98. The fact that because this series is so much more difficult than it was 5 years ago, and 5 years ago we would have said it was more difficult than it was 5 years prior, right? It's that constant progression as more drivers get involved and that intensity and that level of competition amps up. I think this helps Derek Bordeaux stay on the top of his game as he has to deal with all these drivers coming in. And, you know, it's not like he's in this top split, but riding around in the 30s. He is here to make some noise and very clearly has intentions on getting back to that very top step of the ladder. Second place, Keister clear, and it'll be side by side between McCollum and Retzlaff for third and fourth.
I also have to believe that Derek being out of the series for a few years the way he has been and seeing the evolution from the outside, I think it increases the hunger maybe more so than some of the newer folks who haven't seen the evolution of the Coke series, and also makes you appreciate, and especially for the drivers that have been in the series for a while, the Michael Contis and company in particular, makes everybody sort of in that camp appreciate what the series has become more. You value just how special it is to be one of the 40 in the Coke series if you've been around and seen it grow the way it has. Jeff McCone.
Absolutely, and I can assure you that Derek is hungry. He wants to get back up there. He wants to prove himself. When he went out of that series, now he wants to get back up in there. So now he's sitting in first place. The question is, when is he going to pit? Because all of a sudden, just like the first time, the radios have lit up, people calling out they're coming to pit road. This is their last pit stop under green. So these guys are being very aggressive here as Jordy Lopez with a very aggressive entry barely gets it down to speed in time. Now he is going to be all set. This is going to be some very, very intense stuff. You see a gaggle of about 6 trucks come in. What will Derek and Colin and Parker do up at the front? Are they going to stay out, or are they going to hit pit road and get that fresh rubber on as soon as you can? If I'm up on the box, I'm telling them they need to get to pit road now.
I think you need to get to pit road for no other reason because just on that pit stop, I saw no less than 3 Altus trucks come down for service. Seth the Merchant, Jordy Lopez, and Braden Bulos all came down at the beginning of lap 102. So there's definitely some teamwork in play, and they're going to try and work together to bypass everybody on the short pit, try and gain some track position, and potentially try and lock up some spots near the top of the pylon. Whether or not this pans out, we'll have to see. And whether or not we go green over the next few laps, that we'll also have to wait and watch for. But definitely teamwork at play early on in this qualifying series season.
And you see Keister and Retzlaff dive to the pit lane that time. More drivers behind. Roper, King, McCandless, Tucker, Lapsevich, all down pit road. Remember, on that first green flag cycle, everybody cycled through pit stops in about 4 or 5 laps. It was a very tight pit window, and they did it right at 1/3 distance. No shock, guys, that this pit cycle kicked off with about 34 laps to go. That just so happened to be about 34 laps since they were all last down pit road. Everybody seems to be roughly in agreement that this needs to be a split strategy as it plays out. Bourdon now will give up the race lead, and I'll just about cycle things through. A handful of drivers, the likes of Atchison, Dansett, Allen, and some of the other drivers towards the back of the field still staying out. Maybe this is an opportunity where you stay out, push the fuel a little bit, and try to catch a yellow.
I think if there's one driver that very obviously gets the chance to sit out and stay for a little bit and maybe make this work, has to be Cody Bias in the 19. With all that front end damage, Jeff McConey, why not? You're not going to be able to pass anybody just off of raw speed. So if you get lucky, you get a yellow flag here, maybe you gain a few spots.
If you're lucky, but at this point, your bet is made and it's time to lay in it. The best time to pit is right after the first person does. The second best time is 1 lap ago, and the third best time is 2 laps ago. If you're still out there and you're on, you don't have any damage, you're trying to run out and be competitive, it's too late. You have to stay out now and lay in your bet that you've made, but they're in trouble. They're way off the pace if you're still out there on old tires.
You get a little bit dicey here. Some of these trucks work their way around. Some of these old tire trucks that have yet to come down for service. The fresh rubber and the old rubber mixing and mingling can make things a little bit sketchy in places on this racetrack. But as it stands, you can also play along if you're watching on the Podium Esports Twitch channel. Got a poll up. We want to know whether or not you think we're going to go green until 20 to go or not. We could punch a vote in. Let us know what you think, and we'll see whether or not your crystal balls are working any better than ours as we wind the laps down in the season opener for the 2021 eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series. We're still waiting for Atchison to come down pit road, but Matt Danson, another one of the Altus trucks, is going to make his last pit stop now. So he comes in, leaves Atchison, Jeremy Allen, Brad Mahar, and Cody Bias as the 4 final drivers left to make their last green flag pit stop of the night.
Well, they almost got away with it, right? 3 laps ago, we saw that huge pack in 1 and 2. One of those Altus trucks nearly got turned off of the corner. That's what those drivers staying out were banking on, right? That's the gamble, as they were hoping in this mix of fresh tires, old tires, comers and goers would have caused some issues. But you saw Danson pull the plug first. He came down pit road, and, Atchison's been out there for 44 some odd laps. So he can still push it quite a bit longer if he really wants to. But, the question is, to the point that Jeff made, you're kind of laying in the bed that you made for yourself, because you can stay out another 15 laps if you want, run or drive, but it's going to be abysmal at that point where you shake out in the running order. You're hoping to only have to go maybe 5 laps, catch a yellow. It really is an all-in gamble. We're in Vegas, so why not roll the dice? But we know he had to get that one in there at least once. But not shocked these 4 drivers up front going to try to stretch this one. It may not even matter, though, right? The likes of Keister, Retzlaff, those leading the charge on fresh tires, some 25 seconds back. At that pace, they can catch him and pass him anyways, even if those top 4 could go the distance. So this call is solely to try to catch a yellow.
What you see on your screen is the battle for the net lead. If we stay green flag racing and everybody comes down pit road and it cycles through, then the battle that you see on your screens between Colin Keister and Parker Retzlaff right here at the front of this group entering turn 1 would be for P1. However, that is certainly not a given, and it does appear that the 4 trucks in the top 4 spots are going to try and stretch this and see if they can get a yellow. It didn't work for Malik Ray on Tuesday night. He tried to stretch it the same way Atchison and Allen and company are, and just didn't quite have enough fuel to make it to the end. But it could play out differently in this qualifying series opener. We'll just have to wait and see. But that's how things stand at the front of the field. Top 4 are all going to try and run this out, and everybody else is trying to either run to catch them or hope that this goes green the rest of the way so they can get their track position back. And one of them eventually lands in victory lane, Jeff.
Absolutely, and we'll see which strategy works. But another downside when you're staying out this long and you're losing so much time because you're so much slower. I mean, these guys are, if not a full second, maybe 2 seconds slower. You're running into trouble there because you also now can't make adjustments. However, you also can now come in a little bit later. You'll be running 10, 15 less laps. You can slap some more tape on. You can make more aggressive adjustments. We're going to see what goes on behind the scenes here. Who's got the best crew chief? Who's got the most aggressive crew chief? How much tape are you going to put on to get it right up to that limit, if not push it a little bit over? What tire pressure adjustments are you going to make now that we're on a bit of a shorter run? What adjustments are you going to make now that the track is so worn in and the track temperature is fully set? What are you doing if you're the guy up on the box? That's probably the toughest job out there behind driving, is figuring out what your driver needs in order to win.
Evan, you've been here in real life more than a few times, so as this race has progressed in sim, can you give an overview to everybody watching at home of how this track evolves over the course of an afternoon, how the way this track rubbers in, the way the sunlight changes on this track changes the way you have to drive it in order to continue to hit your optimal lap times?
Yeah, and that goes back to the point that I made very early on, right? The fact that NASCAR, these trucks, they normally run on a Friday night, so you have that evening to nighttime progression that you don't see in this race run in the middle of the afternoon. But it does change 1 and 2 versus 3 and 4. We've seen some of the close calls specifically in 4 tonight come because when you're side by side at this end of the racetrack, the outside line, if you will, you can see that rubbing groove. The outside line's only about a lane up from the bottom. So even if you're on the top, you're still on the door of the trucks wanting down on the white line. When you come down here into 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, I should say, those billboards do cast a shadow. It keeps the track a little bit cooler, and the outside, meaning closer to the fence, is more of an outside line than it is in 3 and 4. So you do have to attack the 2 corners of the racetrack a bit differently.
I think you consider the bumps in 1 and 2 and the way they're a little bit more pronounced on that end of the racetrack in sim than they are in 3 and 4, and that only underscores your point that the, I'd say, optimal lines that you could run, especially if you're running in that high groove, definitely are different between the far end and the near end of the racetrack as we close in on the final 20 laps of this race. And keeping an eye on Jesse Atchison, Jeremy Allen, Brad Mahar, and Cody Bias. It's that quartet that is trying to stay out, stretch this, hope for a yellow flag to try and get the track position. Meanwhile, Parker Retzlaff leads the group that's come down for service, and he is about 16 seconds back of your race leader, running about a second per lap faster. So he should be good to go if the leaders can maintain this pace, but it's going to be tight. They catch Atchison and company with about 4 laps to go, Jeff McConaughey, and there's certainly the old adage of catching somebody and passing somebody being 2 different things that I think would come into play too. But 1 truck down pit road. Looks like Jesse Atchison is going to surrender his spot. So what was 4 trucks, now down to 3 that are trying to stretch this fuel run.
Yeah, that's it for Jesse Atchison. Now he comes down pit road. He'll be in pretty good shape if there's a caution that comes out, but as it sits right now, he gambled in Sin City and he lost. It's not looking good for him. Same thing with Jeremy Allen, Brad Mahar, Cody Bias. They're in trouble. And Parker Retzlaff, Derek Woodall, Colin Keister, Donovan Strauss are running them down quickly, like a couple seconds a lap quickly. They will just flat out catch them before the end of the race. So now they're not even worried about anything else. They need a caution within the next 6 laps if they're going to stay ahead of the guys behind them. And if that caution doesn't come out, even if they stay out on those old tires, it doesn't matter. If they've already lost, if they don't get a caution in the next 6 laps or before they pit, whichever comes first.
And James, I just want to jump in and let you in on a little bit of a secret. Most of the time when you come to Vegas and you bet, you lose. The house always wins. That's what they say. So let you in on a little insider tip there.
Yeah, to be fair, I'm not necessarily much of a gambling man myself, but the watching ends up being entertaining. There's a little bit of strategy to it, sort of like what we're doing here. We're watching strategy play out amongst these pit cycles. We're trying to figure out whether or not staying out was the call, but Cody Bias is in. Looks like Jeremy Allen is in, so it is Brad Mahar all alone at the front with a 10-second now, maybe 9-second and change gap to Derek Bordeaux, and it is still about 1 second per lap that Bordeaux and Retzlaff and company are gaining on the number 6 machine. So not too much room to breathe if you're Mahar. Still with catching with about 4 laps to go if this holds. But again, Jeff, there are a lot of variables in play, and let's not forget there are about 30 other trucks that can change the outcome of this race as well.
Absolutely. It only takes one car spinning around to throw this whole thing out of whack. You have to keep that in mind. One caution will completely throw a wrench into the plans for this race. Lap traffic now coming into play, not playing a huge role. But let me ask this to both of you guys. James, Evan, one, who do you think is going to be able to come out here should we stay green? And do you think there's going to be another caution?
Evan, I'll let you take that one first, because honestly, I don't want to touch it right off the
Well, Derek Bordeaux is obviously in the best spot, I think, right? I've always been on the mindset that I'd rather be in the defensive as opposed to the one that needs to make that move late. But I see, we've seen Retzlaff make the moves high and low that I feel like if he can keep on Bordeaux, he's going to get the job done. And as we say that, Brad Mahar is in from the race lead. So this will cycle things through, and it'll put a button on that little bit of strategy. And once timing and scoring updates next time by, Derek Bordeaux officially to the race lead. If he can maintain this gap, he's in a great spot. Retzlaff has got to catch him. So I was going to say Retzlaff, but seeing this difference now, I think Bordeaux's in a good position, and I think this one may be able to get down to the end. I thought we avoid our close calls on that last cycle.
We can effectively chuck the pit strategy out the window. This is mano-a-mano at the front between Retzlaff and Bordeaux, although I think we'd be remiss not to include Colin Keister in the mix too, because Keister is only about 0.2 back of Retzlaff's Toyota Tundra and has pace too, right there on lap times with the number 42 truck. So could be fun for second, which only would probably serve to help Derek Bordeaux just that much more. If Retzlaff and Keister start fighting for P2, Jeff McConey, it may as well be a wrap. Bordeaux's going to be able to drive away and win this thing going away.
I agree with you. It seems Parker Retzlaff has been really, really strong on the short run, but longer run hasn't been so hot for him. But as you guys were talking there about how it's looking like we're going to go green, Blake McCandless got into, well, I guess Daniel Roper got into the 14 of Blake McCandless more so than anything, but those two came together, and Blake had a fantastic save, so I don't think it's quite over yet. But if we stay green, I agree with you. Derek is going to be the one to win it because he's got this long run speed right where he needs it.
I forgot to knock on wood, so that's my bad there. That hurts
no.
Blake, though. Blake was working so hard to get to the doorstep, James, to the top 10 there where Dan Roper sits now, and it's forced him to drop back to 16. So better than the alternative of being racked down in that one, but he worked all race to get those 4 or 5 spots and loses it there at the end.
It seems like the last few days in competition, Blake's just not had a lot of luck, so he'll try and regroup, I think, in 2 weeks and just survive the last few laps here before we start looking towards our second race of this qualifying series campaign. But it's Bordeaux in control here, working towards 8 laps to go as Cody Bias is going to work to the outside on the fresh tires. And again, just shows you the power of fresh rubber on these trucks. Even if your truck is completely dinged up every single which way around, Cody Bias is still able to keep Derek Bordeaux at bay, which honestly is about the last thing that he needs because it's allowing Retzlaff to gain a 10 every single corner they run side by side.
You're absolutely right. That is the worst possible thing as we get a look at Walter here. Walter having himself a really good run, enjoying his time on the back of Anthony Burrows' truck as he works his way around Jordi Lopez. Now, these guys are starting to get aggressive. This is where you got to just hang it all out on the line. As a good friend of mine once said, you got to win it or wear it. And now they are out here, 9th place for Walter. But up at the front, Derek Bordeaux only has about a 1/4 of a second back to Parker Retzlaff. That lap car battling side by side really helped them reel him in. So now this is going to get interesting with more quicker lap traffic. Here you have the number 6 of Brad Mayer, and now he goes around the outside and costs Derek that little bit of extra time that he had pulled over Parker Retzlaff.
This has to be incredibly frustrating if you're Derek Bordeaux. Not only are you dealing with trucks on fresher tires that are taking away your racing line, that are slowing you down, but this track has come under cloud cover right at the very, very end of this race, and that's going to change the way these drivers attack this racetrack in the final handful of laps, Evan.
Yeah, Retzlaff's going to be on the attack, right? And that's going to help him. This is going to play in favor of Retzlaff in second. And it's not just the lap traffic that hurt him, right? Because, well, they both had to get around Retzlaff and Bordeaux. So in theory, they would have both been affected. But both times I saw Bordeaux catch that lap traffic, they took away his line on exit. So he basically didn't get the optimal line through the corner. He wasn't able to carry all the speed he wanted to down the straightaways. And that's why Retzlaff is there within 2 truck lengths. Coming to 4 laps to go. The 42, I should say, is right back in this thing.
All eyes on the lap times, but that wasn't a good run through the center of the corner, I don't think, for Parker Retzlaff. He bounced up the racetrack about 2 or 3 lanes before you like to, and as you look on the board, it was pretty much dead even. It was 0.43 to an 0.77. Both trucks running 32-second lap times. Parker Retzlaff's going to need a little bit more than that, but he continues to eke up in the wake of the 04 truck. He's beginning to punch a hole for Retzlaff to charge right on through, Jeff.
Draft is huge here, but catching someone is one thing. Passing them is an entirely different ballgame. Derek Bordeaux now has one of the best iRacers on the service, the #1 rated driver with over 9,000 iRating. Right behind him, right on that back bumper. Parker has found some speed here at the end, but can Derek hold him off? Getting to him is one thing. Passing him is another for Parker Retzlaff, who sticks his nose to the inside. He's got to run.
There goes Parker Retzlaff to the inside of Bordeaux, who got a little bit loose. I saw the right rear beginning to fade on the 04 Toyota Tundra, and Retzlaff to the inside for the race lead as they come to 2 laps to go. And now that he's made the pass, can Retzlaff hang on to win the season opener of the top split of the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series?
Bordeaux wants it back, fakes high, looks to the inside, wants to get on the inside of the 42 of Retzlaff, but he just can't stick it on the inside of 1 and 2. Retzlaff will pull about a 3/4 truck length advantage into 3 and 4. Bordeaux really needs a whale of a last lap. If they get to the white flag, this one's official, and Retzlaff stretches it.
And what's even more impressive as they come to the white flag, Retzlaff came down pit road before Bordeaux. Bordeaux's got the fresher tires, but with the way he's been running this, Jeff McConey, that right rear on the 60 or the 04 truck looks gone.
It certainly does, and that will really hurt his corner exit. Now he needs to get momentum here and needs a good run down the backstretch, but 3 truck lengths is all that separates him from a win, and Parker Retzlaff has just 2 more corners to go for this checkered flag.
One more good set of corners, and it is going to be Parker Retzlaff with the number 42 Toyota Tundra that goes to victory lane. The Wisconsin native comes out west and takes the season opener for the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series from Las Vegas, ahead of Derek Bordeaux, who gave a great charge in those final few laps to try and get back to Parker, but Parker Retzlaff had speed all night long, climbed from his starting spot of 11th, got in the top 5 early, and was just there. Made it work on that final green flag run, Evan Pashoko, and he's the first man to claim a winner sticker in this series for 2021.
And when Jeff asked us who we thought was going to win this, I went off and told you all the reasons why Retzlaff could, right? How he's been able to make the passes high and low, how he's been in striking distance, and then I chickened out and said maybe Bordeaux is going to be able to hang on to the track position, and Parker proved the earlier point and proved that I should have just stuck with it, right? We talk about how catching someone, passing someone are 2 different things. Retzlaff was able to make moves better than most people tonight, chased him down in an incredible final 6 laps and didn't look back. That was perfectly executed by the 42 for the season opening win.
Parker Retzlaff is going to be a force. I think in a sense, no surprise, Jeff McConey, that the man with the highest I rating in the entirety of this series, this being top split, comes away with victory #1 of the year. Sort of mirrors what we've seen in the Coke Series to start, where our first few winners all have had tons of experience, championships in their back pockets, and championship type runs. It's been the big dogs that have won Coke Series races early, so maybe not a surprise to see the same here in the qualifying series to start off 2021.
It certainly is, and Parker is well known for his talent, and he's got the win here tonight. brings it home in first place, does a little bit of a burnout, and then takes it back to the garage post-race inspection. Usually they're pretty light. I think he'll make it through there, no problems at all. But Parker Retzlaff, your winner here tonight with Derek Bedard in second.
A lot of short trackers with experience up there. Big night for you, Jeff McConey. I know you love seeing the short track guys run well, but we know Alex McCollum, a short track ace, and a man with plenty of speed. Donovan Strauss has run his fair share of short tracks, but just big time names that if you've been part of this community for a long while, you know that these drivers are going to be fast, and it's no surprise that they come away with top 10 finishes. We'll scroll on a little bit and see who finished in that 11th and 20th range, and drivers who had quiet runs and snuck up late. I think Michael Finlayson, Justin Bolton all came up with late speed and got pretty solid finishes out of it. Blake McCandless, Evan, you said, ran into that trouble late and got loose, but it still comes home with a respectable 15th place finish. And Brian Mercurio, Logan Cress in the mix there too.
It could have been worse for him because that pack behind him, right, the likes of Mercurio and Cressida, they were all on top of each other to the end of this one. And, somebody like a Matt Danson who tried to stay out on that strategy ends up second half of the field through 24th. You got the likes of Brad Mayhard, Jeremy Allen, some of the vets back through the top 30 in this one. And, for a green flag stretch all the way to the end, and for the way that this race played out, 32 drivers finished at the 35 in the lead lap.
There's a look at your full field rundown, and you get the chance to see where your favorite driver finished. And as we get set to talk to some of your top finishers, we'll go ahead and bring in the man who finished in P5. A big week for you, Donovan Strauss. You come away with a solid run here, and a new partnership too with Elliott Sadler Esports, but a good night to start off that campaign and your qualifying series campaign for this young season.
Yeah, I was a little anxious going in just because we haven't done this since September. Well, I was in the Pro Series, but Road to Pro since September, and I was worried about our speed, but I told my teammates going in that I think we had a top 10 piece, and we played the cards right. We made some adjustments during the race. It was about like a 12th place truck until the first pit stop, and we ended up P5. So, I couldn't be happier with that to start the season.
A good finish, a good run. I think we'd be remiss not to talk about the ESC partnership, though. You just announced that before the race today. And how big is it for you to join that organization that's got some feet in the Coke Series, that has drivers with speed in that stable? What are you looking forward to the most about running with ESC this year?
Yeah, everyone at ESC puts in so much work, and I couldn't be more happy to be with them on the Coke side with Vicente, Garrett, Ashton. They all work really hard. Everyone on the Road to Pro side, Brendan Kohler, and then we work with Lowline Racing, and they played a big part into our success this week.
Getting ready for Atlanta in a few weeks' time. Similar sort of dynamics at that 1.5 miles. And as we head back east, do you have any anticipations for the second race of the season that give you a little bit of hope?
Well, my plan was if I could run good here, you transfer something similar to Atlanta, and if we can just keep this momentum going, I think we can go into Atlanta and back this up hopefully and continue our good start to the season.
Donovan, congratulations on your top 5 finish. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us, and we look forward to seeing you down in the Peach State in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you.
Donovan Strauss, you comes from P5, and as we start looking towards the end of tonight's broadcast, an entertaining race, I think, across the board, Evan and Jeff. And Jeff, I'll turn to you first. First crack seeing some of the Road to Pro action from this particular perspective. Did you notice anything new watching it from the booth that you might not have seen watching these races from some of the other perspectives that you've been able to watch these races from in the past?
Well, usually I end up watching these races from up on top of the pit box, or I'm helping other people out, or just wrenching on the cars from behind the scenes. So it was nice to just take a step back and watch the race from above. But it was really interesting to watch all the adjustments and everything that these guys were making throughout the run. So you saw people that were really towards the back start to work their way forwards. And I remember saying earlier on, I expected someone that wasn't really running towards the front to come home the winner here. Parker Retzlaff started 11th, gained 10 spots throughout the race to win it. So it just goes to show you're not there to be the fastest guy on lap 1. It's not the fastest truck that wins the race. It's the first one to reach the line. Cody Bias had some trouble throughout. He ended up getting involved in a wreck, destroyed his front end. Some really fast trucks were caught up in some really unfortunate incidents. So it just goes to show, and I think that's going to be a common trend here. You're going to, if I'm back, if you guys will have me back, you're going to hear it week in and week out. It's not the fastest truck that wins. It's the first one to cross the line.
We are going to get final thoughts from Evan in just a little bit, but we've got a winner to talk to who has finally made his way to the booth. Parker Retzlaff now joins us. And Parker, I think that final green flag run was so typical of the way you approached this race. But was it difficult to maintain the patience as you ran down Derek in the final 20 laps?
I mean, yeah, this is my first ever road to pro race, like taking it all serious and everything. And our truck went through like a really tight stage. So I thought I lost the race once I hit that stage, and everyone on the team reminded me that it was going to come back to me, and it did. And I just got it done.
How big is this for you? When you come in here, you have the highest I rating. We made the point on the broadcast on multiple occasions that to come in here with the 9,000 means that not only do you have the target on your back, but you sort of have a level of excellence to uphold. So to be able to do that and start off with the victory in the top split and get max points tonight, how big is that for you at this point in the season?
Yeah, I mean, my goal coming into it was just to finish top 10, top 15, and have a solid points day to go into the next week, because I raced a lot of short tracks, so anything above like a mile is something that I don't do a lot. So I put a lot of testing into it, and the team built a really good truck for the week.
We turn our attention to Atlanta in a few weeks' time. Similar sort of racetrack. Do you expect the same sort of, I don't know if it's luck that'll carry it from Vegas. It usually stays here, it seems like. But same sort of approach, I think, in a lot of ways that you're going to need to be successful at Atlanta. So what are you looking forward to the most about that race in 2 weeks' time?
I mean, I haven't even done a lap at Atlanta, so I'm not really sure what I'm expecting yet, but I'll put a lot of time into it, and hopefully I show up and we have the same result in Atlanta as we did here.
Congratulations to you and everybody at Bobby Dale Earnhardt's Legacy Esports on your victory tonight in Top Split, Parker. Congratulations. We look forward to seeing you down in Georgia in a few weeks.
Thank you. I got to thank Reaper, Legacy, or everyone at Legacy, Boyd for all the hard work, Chris, Abruzzi, Ponzi, EcoTrack, Strikeforce Energy, everyone that does anything at Legacy. Thank you guys for all your hard work, and you guys for putting this whole thing on.
Parker Retzlaff, your winner, and Evan, I think you heard it in his voice there right at the end, and you think of all the people that he rattled off, and it absolutely just highlights the point that we made earlier on in the broadcast about the significance of teams and how much the organizations make a difference. In that sense, maybe not a huge surprise that one of the largest organizations comes away with the victory in the split that matters most this evening.
Well, it shows you how much the drivers are aware of it too, right? I mean, they are very aware that the competition that happens is well beyond just what we saw tonight on the racetrack, right? It goes back to, you talk about some of the teams involved in this that are kind of development branches of some of the teams all the way up to the Coke Series level and beyond, is that it is a lot more that goes into winning this race outside of the 134 laps tonight, right? But to Jeff's point, it wasn't a walk in the park for Parker, right? He had to make some moves, got a lot of those spots early, so he spent a lot of time towards the front, but certainly at the end there with Derek Bordeaux, had to fight to get the race win. And if for somebody like him as a short track guy, if he can just get a win, right, hoping for a top 15, top 10 and up in victory lane, it's going to bode very well for him when he gets more into his wheelhouse at some of the shorter tracks later on the calendar.
It's a bit of a terrifying thought when you think about it, that I wouldn't necessarily consider this to be Parker's strongest type of racetrack, and yet here we are, and he's already got a win on the type of racetrack that makes up more of the schedule than any other. So he makes that happen. That's a little bit scary to think about this early on in the season. A big thanks to so many of the folks who have come in and rated us this evening or subscribed or followed. We've been paying attention all night. We appreciate the support. And if you like what you've seen here on Podium Esports, there is plenty more where that came from in the next week. A whole host of events that we can talk about over the span of the next few days. And it continues tomorrow night with the opening of PCA Sim Racing's 2021 season. The Zone Group Challenge, an all-new competition featuring the different regions of the Porsche Club of America, begins at Watkins Glen International. You can see that broadcast tomorrow night starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the PCA Sim Racing YouTube channel. come back here to the Podium Esports Twitch channel on Sunday night, 9:15 p.m. Eastern. It's the MPI Cup Series All-Star Race from Kansas. The elimination format that was used in the All-Star Race back at what was then Lowe's Motor Speedway in the early 2000s is back in play. And the biggest question, who gets eliminated and who survives to get victory on Sunday night here on the main Twitch channel? You can head on over to twitch.tv/Podium2, as well as Podium Esports Facebook and YouTube pages for the closing stretch of Monday Night Racing presented by Tufco Flooring, coming down to at the beginning of the round of 7, the penultimate round of the playoffs for them. They'll take the Porsche 911 RS on to the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal. Should be a lot of fun to see all the action there. 8 p.m. Eastern Monday night, your start time there. Then next Wednesday, it's the Dirt Sprint Car Championship Series from Kokomo. Catch it on the same channels, 9 p.m. next Wednesday, before the MSRA Premier Series is back in action here on Podium. Same Podium 2 Twitch channel, plus YouTube, plus Facebook combo from Phoenix Raceway. That's next Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, before we are back on air with the eNASCAR Road to Pro Qualifying iRacing Series round number 2 from Atlanta Motor Speedway. You'll see that broadcast here on the Podium Esports Twitch channel at 9 p.m. Eastern, Thursday, March 18th. So many folks to thank for our first broadcast of the year. Of course, you're going to be able to see action from the eNASCAR Road to Pro Qualifying Series all year long here on Podium Esports. And the second split you're going to see all year long on SCN. Zach Johnson and company putting on a great show. And heard they had a run to the line that was dead even. So you might want to go check the highlights out on that one on their Twitch or YouTube when you get the chance. But for us, it's time to wrap up our broadcast from Las Vegas. So for Gary Sexton, Cisco Scaramuza, and John Theodore at Podium Esports, for producer this evening, Ryan Bauer, and for my colleagues here in the booth, Jeff McConey and Evan Pashoko, I am James Pike, the voice of Podium Esports. Thank you so much for watching our broadcast of the eNASCAR Road to Pro Qualifying Series. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time from Atlanta Motor Speedway.